Final Fantasy is a name that needs little introduction in the gaming sphere. As soon as you hear the name Hironobu Sakaguchi, Tetsuya Nomura, or even Square Enix as a whole, it's instantly synonymous with universally appraised and acclaimed game series. Its position as a titan in the industry has been practically unchallenged since its inception in 1987, and has consistently pushed the boundaries to produce unique games time after time and year after year. The series is most known for its epic quests and adventures, a turn-based battle system, and that one guy who just totally is not guts with frosted tips. Occasionally, the franchise even pushes the boundaries on when we should draw the line on what counts as a game and what counts as art. Unlike most people who discuss Final Fantasy, I'm a complete newcomer. I've got a grand total of 0 hours on the series coming into this. Despite that, Final Fantasy 16 is on the horizon, and that game's looking sick as hell, so I figured now would be the perfect time to jump in. I'm the kind of gamer who can't just play the latest game in a series. I always have this itch that's telling me to start from the very beginning and work my way through all of it. You know, that's why I usually gravitate towards games with running stories, where you have to play multiple games to uncover the entire picture. Games like Metal Gear Solid, or games like the Yakuza franchise. But by having no nostalgia whatsoever, I'm able to come into these games and talk about them without the rose-tinted glasses that we see too often. And I can really get to see if these experiences live up to the hype, or expose them if they happen to fall short of their iconic legacy. And because of all this, hopefully I'm going to be able to give an interesting take on the series when I talk about it. You know, one that you might not see very often, one that's a complete newcomer, one that's fresh, and one that'll really just judge it on its quality now. I haven't played the game before, nor was I alive when it first came out, so I can't in good conscience call this a fully fledged retrospective. But by including my opinions and personal feelings of the game, this also means that it isn't a flat-out review either. Rather, I've gone for a more general approach, and so today I'm going to share with you my experience with the Square Enix 1987 classic, Final Fantasy. Now, before I get into the meat of this transcendental experience that left me holier than a white mage, I gotta throw out some disclaimers to all you out there. Due to its nature as the first entry in one of the most iconic series in gaming, Final Fantasy has had many remasters, remakes, and ports throughout the years. There are over 10 different versions to play, ranging from hardware like the Game Boy Advance all the way to more niche consoles, like everyone's favorite Wonder Swan Color. But out of all of these different options, I went with the most recent one, the Pixel Remaster on Steam. It was entirely out of convenience and easy of access. If there are any hardcore series veterans watching, waiting for the perfect chance to scream at me, this would definitely be the perfect opportunity. I'm just saying. Now, speaking a little more to the image and legacy of Final Fantasy, there's no way I can cover this game, and hopefully the entire series, without bringing up the music. I've only heard Sephiroth's theme coming into the series, but I know that it's a big source of pride for the fans. After all, there's a reason why most gamers who even have a passive knowledge of Final Fantasy know the name Nobuo Uematsu. I'm nowhere near qualified to discuss music in regards to the theory or the composition, so I'll just give my opinion on how the music sounds and how it's leveraged to add weight to the game. What a legend. Thank you, Nobuo Uematsu. And of course, this is my first video, but also my first time recording audio and video, and then editing that to try and salvage whatever's left of the mess I'm creating. So I have very low expectations, and maybe get pleasantly surprised along the way. I'm also not a trusted authority in video games, you know? I'm not exactly Loot is Scary, or I finished a video game, or Summoning Salt. So take everything I say with a lot, like oceans of salt, you know? This isn't really the most professional piece you'll be watching if you're looking for a deep dive into the history, in the making, and the programming of Final Fantasy. And I apologize for the script, I apologize for the editing, I apologize for the existence of this dumpster fire of a passion project, and with that, I think everything's out of the way, and it's time to get started. Thank you all for showing up, and I hope you enjoy whatever's left of this by the end of it. Now, when we boot up the game, the first thing I noticed was the only complaint I saw about the Pixel Remaster. It was the font choice. And while in the grand scheme of the game, yeah, it ain't a big deal, but I feel like a classier font or something that more accurately represents what the game was like when it released, it genuinely would add a lot more to my enjoyment of the minute-to-minute moments of the game, which, you know, is what makes up the game. And I know that the PlayStation version of the Pixel Remaster added a classic font, so I'm just praying that the PC games are updated with it soon, because I don't really want to swap consoles midway through and figure a way how to record that footage just because of the font. It wasn't a difficult fix to change the font to something a little more manageable. I just had to open up the files, make a copy of the Japanese text files, rename one of those to the same name as the English version, and then delete the pre-existing English files. Once all that was taken care of, I was switched to a pretty sleek home screen that played the now iconic Final Fantasy Prelude. An interesting fact that I found out about while researching the game is that the track was a last-minute addition that the Alpha Chad Nobu Uematsu wrote in like 10 minutes when he was told the game needed a main theme right before launch. What a legend. Thank you, Nobu Uematsu. Immediately after we started a new game, we're asked to assign the classes and names for 4 characters. From what I gathered, these 4 Warriors of Light have no instantly recognizable or canonical names, so instead I just chose to name them after myself and 3 of my close friends. As for the classes, we have a few options here. First up is the Warrior, a fighter who could don heavy armor as well as wield a variety of physical weapons. He's like the tank and damage dealer. Next is the Thief, who is a quick and nimble little manlet who focuses on evasion and fast strikes as opposed to brute force. On the flip side of the Thief is the Monk, a purely physical fighter who tests his mettle with traditional hand-to-hand combat in pursuit of honing his body to perfection. After these more physical classes, we have our 3 mages, those of red, white, and black. White mages specialize in healing teammates and providing helpful buffs, while the black mage focuses on attacking the enemy using damage-dealing spells. To finish off the list, we have the red mage, who offers the balance of white and black magic, as well as utility spells like teleports. After our class selection is done, we're treated to the first cutscene of the game. We see a panning shot of a castle, a windy desert, and a coastal town that's being ravaged by the ocean, all the while text is being overlaid on the screen. We're told that the world is under influence of a great darkness, and evil that's affecting even the health of the land. Regions are being covered in shadow, the winds are suddenly going still. Waves are rampaging wildly, and the ground withers away and dies in an instant. And yet, the people of this world remain hopeful, for one day a prophecy written by a man named Lucan will be fulfilled. When darkness veils the world, 4 warriors of light shall come. We are the 4 warriors of light. And after the first cutscene, we're dropped in Cornelia Town. And as soon as I got here, I immediately felt welcomed and cozy. It was like sitting next to a warm campfire in the middle of the winter. I have to say that the pixel art is absolutely phenomenal, and the remastering team really killed it in this department. I also have to give mega major props to the sound team for remastering all of Uematsu's tracks for the game into a modern orchestral masterpiece. As though someone would rather not listen to ambient microwave noises for the entirety of the playthrough, it was thoroughly enjoyed for me. What a legend. Thank you, Nobu Uematsu. Mechanically, however, the game is as you'd expect for an experience trying to re-emulate and recreate a late 80s game. Very limited controls that could be explained a little more clearly, but serviceable at best. The Pixel Remaster does include the ability to sprint, which is a godsend. I feel like every good game these days has to have a sprint button or a jump button. Anyways, our so-called Warriors of Light enter the cozy town, rest at an inn, and use the hard-earned guild to purchase new weapons and armor, spells, and other useful items like potions or Phoenix Downs, which are just revives, to aid you in battle and exploration. If, by any chance, a party member happens to fall in battle, you just visit the local church to revive them, for a fee, of course. Even local followers of the J-Man upstairs have got to make that bank somehow. Get to that Grussel, you know what I'm saying? We get a little bit of world building by talking to the NPCs, learning small tidbits about the town, such as Cornelia being the city of dreams, and that to the east there's a port city called Pervoca, which recently has been ravaged by pirates. Once a guard notices that your squad is carrying those rose quartz chakra-lining necklaces, they take you to the Cornelia castle to talk to the king, who apparently has some interest in them, and in you. You present your crystals to the king, who then concludes that we are truly the warriors of light, destined to fight evil and save the world from the darkness that it's plagued by. We also learn of a knight called Garland, the king's most capable knight, and a man who's never even lost a battle, and he has taken the king's daughter Sarah hostage. Apparently Garland was corrupted by his strength, and is trying to ransom the king's daughter in exchange for rulership of Cornelia. Garland took Sarah to the Kea Shrine to the north of Cornelia. We're also told that as a reward for returning Sarah, the broken bridge directly north of the town will be rebuilt, which is apparently important enough for our main characters to accept the quest, and then we set out to go rescue Sarah and defeat Garland. What I found interesting, though, is that if you explore the castle, you'll find a storeroom in the back that's locked with magic, and you'll be told by the guards and the wizards that are nearby that the door's been sealed, and the key was given to an elven king, waiting for the Warriors of Light to arrive. I find it's very interesting lore to draw me in, and surely it won't go unanswered. Now that we're given access to the outside, we should be talking about the open world. The 4 warriors of light are going out into the wild, heading north to the Chaos Shrine to rescue Sarah. The land is quite pretty, and Cornelia is situated in a vast forest adjacent to plains and mountains that are just impassable. There are these random encounters along the way, and the frequency of them isn't too annoying, which is amazing. But I did notice that going on, it became more of a chore, especially when my party is at really low health and I have to get back to a town immediately. But you could always just defend and run away, so it's not that big of a deal. You know, as opposed to the old Persona games, for example, the encounter rate is much more forgiving and much more enjoyable. If you have a sleeping bag, a tent, or cottage, you can camp on the open tiles to restore various amounts of health and mana, which is also really nice. I haven't really seen that in any other RPGs that I've played, and it's a charming mechanic. I enjoy it quite a lot. And now would be the time to talk about combat. As you're exploring the open world, you'll be thrust into these random encounters, these battles, and then, you gotta fight them. Crazy. Who would have guessed? It's a traditional turn-based system that lets you perform various actions. You can obviously do the standard stuff like attack and cast spells and use items. You can also run away or choose to defend to lower the amount of damage you take. Depending on the RNG and the luck, you could do more damage or hit multiple times, but that's all left up to your stats and the luck. All the roll the dice. And I must say that the battle theme that plays it's incredible. The way it was remastered especially, it has a lot of rushing moments that wants me to be aggressive, and it fills me with like a heroic pride where it's like, this fight is me against the enemy for the sake of some important battle, whether that be saving the world, restoring the light to a crystal, me versus this oppressive force. It just makes you feel very heroic, but the biggest issue is that this is the only battle theme that they have outside of boss battles. So it wears down very quickly and becomes more of an annoyance after like 10 hours, as opposed to if they had like 2 other variations. Maybe if you battled on deserts or during ocean battles, it would have been great for that, to have that in the game, to add that little bit extra bit of spice and variety that would make it so that every time I hear the song, it wouldn't hurt as much to my ears. But standalone, it's a great track, and I enjoyed listening to it, at least in the beginning. What a legend. Thank you, Nobu Uematsu. And this would definitely be the time to talk about spellcasting. Unlike most modern games that have an MP gauge, and then every spell takes off a certain amount of mana from that, it uses a system more unlike the Dungeons & Dragons, with spell slots and different tiers. There are 8 different levels of magic, and each level of magic have 4 spells inside of them. You, in your character, your white mage, your black mage, your red mage, they can only learn 3 spells per tier, so there are always going to be 1 that's left behind. And you have certain charges. For example, you can cast a level 1 spell 5 times, a tier 2 spell 3 times, and a tier 3 spell a single time. And those number of charges go up as you level up, of course. Once you've exhausted all those spell charges and those spell slots, you won't be able to get them back unless you sleep at an inn or go camping or use a spell replenishing item. I haven't really seen this spell system used outside of this game in Dungeons & Dragons, so it was fun to implement inside of the game, Of course, the mana system has stuck around because it works, but, going back to classics sometime is fun. Shaking things up, even if it's just a classic system, which is a little bit outdated. I enjoyed it quite a lot. And when it comes to leveling up, it's really standard here. Fighting enemies will earn you certain amounts of gil and experience point, no matter of which it's obviously going towards your party leveling up. It's much more like XP share in Pokemon, where you gain a certain amount of XP and it's all shared by the members of your party. There's a variety of different stats in the game, and they all serve their own purpose to diversify the classes. There's obviously HP, which determines your health, and strength, which increases physical damage. There's agility for deciding turn order, and stamina to increase the amount of health gained per level. Intellect for spellcasting damage, and luck, which determines critical hit chance and evasion, as well as the chance to find items in battle. Now, with a very small amount of grinding, the Warriors of Light will be around levels 4 to 5, or with some grinding around levels 10. And from here, you can enter the Chaos Shrine. Usually it's level 4 to 5, which I'm just putting it out there. It has this eerie ambience to it that's honestly a little unnerving. And it really goes to show how Uematsu can blend his music with the art to instill strong emotions within the players. To the corners of the shrine, we see some chests that you could find some nice gear inside of them, which was vital since the enemies in the shrine could quickly do considerable damage. And then right in the center, we'll see Garland's forces of zombies, plagued rats, skeletons, and more ghastly creatures as we push our way towards the center of the shrine. After working our way through the rest of the shrine, the central room is where Garland finally confronts you, and the 4 warriors of light step up to take down the threat. An epic track plays in the background as you fight the fallen knight. After his defeat, you rescue Sarah, and she brings you back to the palace. We see in the shrine right behind us where Garland was defeated, it's a tablet with a swirling purple orb, which at this point is a mystery to us. If you return to the shrine after the fight, you get some text saying, "The black crystal shines ominously. The air hanging in the room seems slightly distorted." The king gratefully thanks us for rescuing his daughter, and then once again reminds us of the prophecy that was set in motion hundreds of years ago by Lucan. When darkness veils the world, 4 warriors of light shall come. If they cannot gather the shards of light, the darkness will consume all. The 4 crystals will never shine again. We are then told that the bridge to the continent up north will be rebuilt, and there are rumors that a crystal could be found in that continent. Apparently, restoring light to the crystals will take the world out of this darkness. Sarah rewards us with the beautiful loot that's been passed down through her family, and then Sarah's hot sister gives the kiss, and we're off once again. And as the 4 warriors of light cross into the continent into the north, we officially start our journey of ridding the world from evil and restoring it to its splendor. I had an absolutely great time playing through this beginning section, so I'm quite hopeful for whatever comes ahead. Further up north, we enter a cave that's strangely homely. There's candles with blue flames and brooms that sweep themselves. Inside of the cave, we meet Matoya, a blue-haired witch who's currently blind without her crystal eye, which has been stolen from her. At this point, there's nothing we could do to aid her, so instead, we leave, making our way southeast through dense forest and some patches of desert, until we reach the town talked about by that one man in Cornelia, Provoca. Entering the town, I was taken aback a little bit. First, the detail of the pixel art was stunning, especially the waterways that run right through the center of the town, clearly defining this locale of support for seafarers. Next was the grim and oppressive air that the town gave off. Unlike Cornelia, this location offered no comfort. There's a palpable tension in the air, and the hopelessness instilled of all of the locals. As we had before learned, ever since the world had been plunged into darkness, this port was being ransacked by monsters, pirates, and the very ocean itself. Now the town is under the ironclad rule of Captain Bicky and his entourage of pirates. Before confronting the gang, we're given the option to rest at the inn for an increased price, as well as gear up from the same shops. It might be worth noting that as you progress through further cities and continents, the price and usefulness of purchasable gear increases dramatically. But more importantly are the magic shops, where each city you'll visit, you'll be able to purchase another higher tier of magic. At Cornelia, the Black Mage could only purchase the spells Fire, Thunder, Focus, and Sleep. Obviously, Fire and Thunder do Fire and Thunder damage, but Focus and Sleep are debuffs, which lowers an enemy's evasion or puts them all to sleep, respectively. The White Mage could only learn Cure and Protect, spells that offer a minor heal and increase the defense, as well as Dia and Blink, where Dia is a damage-dealing spell that can only target the undead, and Blink increases the evasion of a party member. But in Provoca, Tier 2 spells are offered that are now more useful and serve new effects. Black Mages can learn Blizzard, which does ice damage, as well as Temper, Dark, and Slow. Temper increases the strength of an ally, Dark inflicts the Darkness debuff, which lowers their accuracy, and Slow lowers the number of matter attacks an enemy can perform. The White Mages can pick up Null Shock, Invis, Blind Knot, and Silence. Null Shock halves incoming lightning damage, Invis increases the invasion of an ally, Blind Knot heals the blind status element, and Silence inflicts the status of the same name, preventing enemies from casting spells. After arming themselves, the heroes face a tyrannical Captain Bicky and fight through a wave of his men, which is nothing the fabled Warriors of Light can't handle. After all of the pirates have been defeated, Bicky surrenders and swears to having a change of heart, attempting to repent and even gives you his ship, allowing us to travel on the ocean. We no longer have to be walking across continents anywhere near as much, we could just sail between them. With a boat at our side, we're free to explore the wide ocean. While the initial kick of sailing was awesome, it got old pretty fast. The non-linear nature of the game will make it confusing on where to go next in the later portions of the game. Although there's nothing stopping you from exploring every part of the map in the ocean to find ports or other accessible areas, the nature of sea battles makes the whole ordeal time and resource consuming. so you want to get back to land as soon as possible. You can encounter more pirates on the ocean, but mainly you'll come across variations of fishmen, sharks, floating brains for some reason, and brains can paralyze your characters temporarily, which was not fun when I ran across that. Because of the frequency of random battles, you'll constantly be losing health and potions, as well as magic if you try to heal them with that. It frustrated me after a while because I just wanted to get to the next story beat, since that's what I was playing for, not exactly the riveting gameplay of moving the D-pad and pressing select 4 times. Anyways, we make our way south, and then we land right outside the town of the elves, Elfheim. Elfheim is extremely unique in that it is the first of many locations that feature 2 levels of spell shops as opposed to 1. As the elves are synonymous with prestige in magic, it is only fitting that you're allowed access to level 3 and level 4 white-black mage spells respectively. On level 3, the white mage can learn Cura, Diara, Null Blaze, and Heal. Cura is a more potent form of cure, increasing single target healing. Diara deals increased damage to the undead, Null Blaze halves fire damage, and Heal restores health to the entire party on a small scale. For level 4, they can learn Poisona, Fear, Null Frost, and Vox. Poisona cures poison, Fear makes the enemies flee, Null Frost halves frost damage, and Vox cures silence. On the black mage side, level 3 includes Fira, Hold, Thundara, and Fokara. Fira does larger fire damage to a single target. Hold inflicts paralysis. Thundara deals lightning damage to all enemies, and Fokara lowers enemy evasion. Once on level 4, the black mage can learn Sleepra, Haste, Confuse, and Blizzara. Sleepra puts all enemies to sleep. Haste is very important. It is a spell that can increase the number of hits a party member can perform per attack. Confusion inflicts confusion, and Blizzara deals greater single target ice damage. For physical attackers, you're able to purchase mithril swords for a hefty 4,000 gil, and the standard upgraded weapons for the other classes. I believe this is where we could first buy the armlet, a piece of armor specifically designed for the arms, being more versatile and available to more classes. The town itself is as one would imagine, in tune with nature with vibrant trees and off-color grass that somehow looks magical in nature. The buildings are cute yet large cottages with woven roofs. The villagers all look like Link as well. Interestingly enough, there's even a gravestone with the name Link on it. I always love when companies add references to other media and other companies, especially if they're released around the same times. It's almost like they have this sort of friendly competition and respect for each other. The NPCs are much more distressed than they appear, however. Astos, the king of the Dark Elves, has disappeared, and that's concerning to the Light Elves, as they don't know where their greatest enemy is lurking. Additionally, the Elven Prince has fallen into an unending slumber, with seemingly no method to be waken up. After resting up and purchasing our equipment, we set out, ready to search for anything that might wake up the prince. Hugging the mountain range and heading north, the Warriors of Light reach a dilapidated fortress, known as the Western Keep. Inside we find the king, who says that he was struck by Astos, causing the castle to fall into ruin. He mentions that the castle could be restored to its glory with the crown found in the Marsh Cave, so that's where we head next. If we head south following the mountains, we'll reach Marsh Cave. If I recall correctly, this is our first experience with the poison ailment. If you're attacked by a poison creature, there's a very high likelihood that a party member can be afflicted with poison. It continuously drains your health in and out of combat, like poison in early Pokemon games. Resting out inns won't cure it, and the only solution is to find or buy an antidote or use the Poisona family of healing spells. It won't kill you, however, which is a great thing to know. Navigating our way towards the bottom of the cave, the party descends further into the depths. The next space we enter is full of rows of enterable rooms. Many of the rooms have chests full of enemies guarding them, rarer items, or large amounts of gil, a feature soon to become much more prevalent, like the mimics in Dark Souls. If we instead take the path leading up from the entrance, the Warriors of Light can walk down a set of stairs to reach a new floor. Both paths lead you towards the second level depths, another area filled to the brim with different rooms. By this point, the player gets the gravity of how tedious this process is. Instead of a dungeon in The Legend of Zelda, it feels much more like a gauntlet of how fast you can kill or avoid enemies, rather than exploring a deep and mysterious cave system. After being ambushed when opening a chest, we discover the crown is being kept in one of them, which means we're able to return to the Western Keep and the Elven King to return it. Coming back to the king, the party sees him laughing maniacally. We fell right into his trap. The entire time, this Elven King was Astos, king of the Dark Elves. It was a pretty cool reveal which could be pieced together by some rational thinking. If the kingdom of Elfheim was ruined by Astos, why would the king be away from the castle, not aiding the repairing efforts? And of all places, why would he be resting in a rundown fortress, far isolated from civilization? While the surprise is awesome, it could be ruined if we first go to the Marsh Cave instead of Western Keep, which is what I did, so I didn't even know who the king was before he revealed himself to be an imposter. With a flash of blue lightning, he reveals his true demonic form. He claims that with the power of the crown and a crystal eye, he'll become the true Elf King, whatever that means. Astos has no deeper motivation than wanting to take power and to be able to take whatever he wants. The whole plot of an imposter king could have been really well implemented, but the script didn't give enough world building, tension, and just overall development of the plotline, making the whole thing seem lackluster, rushed, and not very memorable. First off, the fight starts with this incredible orchestral piece that reminds me of the Bloodborne soundtrack in some ways, with the choir singing and some low-tone brass. He is really the first boss who leverages spellcasting, finally making use of Null Blaze and Null Shock useful. Another strategy is to cast silence on him early on, preventing the use of his spells. If left unchecked, he'll rain down fire and thunder to the party, even be able to cast death on the Warriors of Light. His health pool is very small, but the damage he can inflict on the party is nothing to scoff at this far in the game. After the fight, he drops the Crystal Eye, which we could then return to Matoya. After some backtracking and sailing, the Warriors of Light are able to return to Matoya's little cozy cave and return her missing eye. Kinda weird how it just popped out of her socket, floated across the sea until an imposter king found it. Well, anyways, in return for her eye, Matoya gives us a Jolt Tonic, which is capable of waking up the Elven Prince. So then we make our way back to the castle. We sail back to Elfheim, and then once we get back to the castle, we meet with the prince and his retainer. We use the Jolt Tonic, and he wakes up from his slumber. He tells us that he will listen to the prophecy of his forefathers and aid us in our battle. He gives us the Mystic Key, which allows us to open the doors and chests that were sealed by magic throughout the game. And here begins our treasure hunt. Throughout the game, I was making mental notes where the sealed chests were, so I just did a lot of backtracking. I decided not to record most of it, because unfortunately most of the gear you receive isn't game breaking or even that worth it. But, you know, there was one, and that's one of the one I was able to record. The Vault in Cornelia Castle, that was originally locked. It contained some pretty useful gear and some armor and some weapons that we could use, but we also got nitro powder. It's a key item that we're going to be using in just a minute. If we sail west from Cornelia or north from Elfheim, we reach a port on the continent bordering Cornelia, which was impassable by the land due to all the mountains. Following the route carved through the mountain, we reach Mount Durgar, home of the dwarves. The mountain is covered in gold and shiny things of all sorts, which seems to be a fascination to the dwarves. They hoard piles and piles of gold, which we can't take any of, which is a little bit of a shame if you ask me. If we travel down the mountain, we meet a dwarf named Narek, who's in need of nitro powder. We learn that it's an incredibly powerful explosive, and Narek needs him to open up a path through the canal of the Western Keep, or directly south of the mountain we're in. The Warriors of Light give Narek our nitro powder, and we stand back for the gnarly explosion. The foresight was enough to open up a pathway connecting the previous locations to the wider ocean and its respective civilizations. Sailing northwest from that opening, we can reach Melmond. Here, the buildings are dilapidated and crumbling, molded and weathered by the elements. The earth itself is decaying and the entire city emanates a desolate air. The townspeople are begging the Warriors of Light to return the crystals to their grace and save the land. A vampire who now lives in the cavern of the earth attacked Melbourne not too long ago, which is why the church is fully destroyed and the reason all of the demolition that's seen here. The earth itself is in ruins, and only the Warriors of Light can prevent further catastrophe. The shops offer a longsword, which is an expensive yet powerful sword for 1500 gil. Even more surprising, though, is the knight's armor, which can be purchased for 45,000 gil. The white mage offers Kiraga, which heals more HP to a single target member, Healara, which heals more to the entire party, Life, which can resurrect a party member, and Diaga, which deals much greater damage to the undead. The black magic spells include Viraga, which is a greater fire damage to all enemies, Scourge, which has a low chance of instantly killing an enemy, Teleport, which can only be learned by the red mage, which moves you one floor out of a cave, and Slowra, which lowers the number of moves an enemy can make. In Melmond, we also get our first mention of airships, technology that ancients possessed to aid them in travel, as well as talk of a ruined civilization in the north. A wise NPC tells the party that at the southern end of the continent lives a man named Sarah, who is very intelligent and can help us with our quest. Now, coming into the Temple of the Earth, even from the very first floor, the Earth Temple is sprawling with lots of differing paths and hidden doors with mimic chests. You encounter Earth Elemental enemies along the way, which are pretty resistant to physical damage and magical damage, except for fire damage, which they're weak to. There isn't much to say about this temple, as it really is one of the more same sprawling and expensive level designs showcased in the first floor. So far, at least, this is the most annoying area I've had to push my way through due to all of the poison and stuff like that. It's horde after horde, and even running away is dangerous because you'll still take damage and can be poisoned, which is the death sentence if you don't heal naturally. We reach the end of the cave and interact with a bat, who begins talking and reveals himself as a vampire, the same vampire that we were out for. The vampire we learned about in Melbourne shows up at the end of the cave, going on about how some seal cannot be broken, and thus the earth will continue to rot. We then start fighting the man. I regret to say that from my personal experience in this fight, I was really let down. You know, I really thought the prize for the worst vampire fight would remain with Vamp in Metal Gear Solid 2, but I think this takes the cake. This is the new champion. In the chest right next to him, we got the Star Ruby, which can be fed to a golem in the Giant's Cave right next to us in order to make him pass. In another room behind the vampire, it's a stone slab which emanates an evil energy. The Warriors of Light have successfully felled another unnatural creature plaguing the land. After the vampire was taken care of, the party backtracks to the Giant's Cave, which was previously inaccessible due to the golem blocking your path, but now you can pass by giving the Star Ruby. We continue on towards the Sage's Cave. As we enter the cave, we're met with a series of rooms that are actually pretty reminiscent of a schoolhouse, which I think is fitting for a scholar like Sada. He tells us that the vampire we defeated was only a pawn in the corruption of the Earth Crystal, and that the true beast lies deeper within the Earth Temple. He gives the Warriors of Light an Earth Rod that we're meant to use at the mysterious stone tablet that we just found a minute ago. Returning back to the temple, we use the Earth Rod on the tablet and it opens up a staircase down to further layers of the cave. It's significantly more troublesome than the first half because you have to fight waves of cockatrices, small birds that can petrify your party, which is only curable with high-level magic or gold needles. When we reach the end of the second half of the dungeon, we find a brown orb next to the dulled Earth Crystal. The brown orb transforms into a terrifying lich, a skeletal creature who feeds off the destruction of the earth. He is the fiend of the earth, who is plaguing the land with decay. We then proceed to fight him, of course. It's just what the Warriors of Light do. The Lich is a master of magic, commanding all the elements to his side, trying to overpower the Warriors of Light. Luckily, he's weak to the Dia family of spells, since he's an undead. This fight turns the White Mage into a heavy damage dealer that came in clutch more than once for my battle. He's also weak to fire, which made for damaging combat with the White and Black Mage tag. The Lich has a large pool of health that took a while to whittle down, although never felt like it was in true danger at any point during the fight. After we defeat him, the Earth Crystal's shine is restored, and we're teleported outside the cavern. From here, we do a little bit of backtracking to Melbourne so we could sail further west, across the edge of the map and circling back around to the other side of the world, where we dock right outside of Crescent Lake City, the next major port. This is by far my favorite location in the game. The aesthetic is right up my alley, and I often found myself going here and just leaving the game idle while doing other things, because the atmosphere it provides. The grass is green, and the flowers bloom in beautiful locations. The Victorian-style houses are lightly draped with vines and with trees surrounding the cities. There are transparent ponds with stone bridges connecting the pathways, and the whole area lends a homely feel which is very welcoming me, especially after Melmond. The shops offer mithril gear, which should be a standard for your party by now. The white magic up for sale is Stona, Exit, Protera, and Invisora. Stona cures stone, Exit removes you from dungeons and caves, Protera increases defense for the party, and Invisora increases evasion for one party member. The black magic offered is Thundaga, Death, Quake, and Stun. Thundaga is the most powerful single target lightning spell. Death has a good chance of instantly killing all enemies. Quake opens up the earth to swallow up enemies, and Stun inflicts paralysis on an enemy. If you go to the right of the quaint city, you find a cleared out patch of forest with a circle of wizards. Ominous. The first bearded man we talked to is Lucan himself, hinted and talked about throughout the entire game. Actually meeting him was a big letdown though. I was hoping for something more awesome than some dialogue and then being sent on my way. Lucan's 12 sages are perhaps even more important than him. Guided by the stars and prophecy, they came to Crescent Lake in search of the warriors of light, who will restore light to the 4 crystals which have been corrupted by the veins of chaos, one of which we've already taken care of, the Lich of the Earth. The elements that make up this world are fire, earth, wind, and water. The power of the 4 elements are found in altars which house crystals throughout the world. We also learn that the fiends of chaos plan to rule the future world and the past world, whatever that means. I'm sure that plot point will come up again in this video. This will come up again later in the video. The ruined civilization to the north was raised by the Wind and Water Fiend, who appeared 400 and 200 years ago respectively. Our favorite Lich, the Fiend of the Earth, rots the land, obviously, and the Fiend of Fire consumes the land in flame. We must return once all the crystals are shining again. The remaining sages tell us that the volcano Mount Golg houses the Fire Fiend, and it's up to us to vanquish her. Apparently, she was supposed to wake in 200 years, but the defeat of the Earth Fiend expedited that process. This last guy also gives us a canoe, because of course he does. Why wouldn't he? We first start our journey to Mount Golg by crossing a lazy river with the canoe. There's not much to say here, but think of the canoe as like a boat for smaller bodies of water, which is probably how you already thought of it. We take a nice cruise through the actual lake of Crescent Lake, and steadily make our way towards Mount Golg. Mount Golg is a location unlike any we've seen yet. The colors really pop, and the use of various shades of red make it stand out from any other set pieces. The gimmick here is that you take burning damage crossing the lava, so think of it as like Lost Isles from Dark Souls if Lost Isles wasn't Hell on Earth. Also, unlike the other caves and altars we've traveled to, the volcano focuses much more on aesthetic level design, rather than forcing players into a gauntlet of 20 to 40 minutes of straight combat. A big plus for this choice, since I never felt like the volcano was dragging on for too long, or that the most tedious part was simply walking. The first floor is simple enough, just navigating through the lava to reach the stairs. Floor 2 is a long hallway, interspersed with lava on the ground, with a row of doors, which lead to probably the largest area of the volcano. It's the only maze-like area in the mountain, and it's easily traveled through with the help of the map. The biggest issue here were the birds that could petrify party members, which got a little annoying. The most powerful normal enemy we could fight here are the fire elementals, which again have high resistance to all damage, save for the ice spells. Another tough foe are the red dragons, which have a rare chance of appearing. They can be taken down pretty quickly, but they can do the same amount of damage if left unchecked. They're like glass cannons. The chests we find aren't that crucial, mainly just ambushes with gil. The 3rd floor of Mount Golg is just a straight walk to the stairs through some lava. Same thing for the 4th. 5th floor is a simple maze puzzle, which can again be trivialized with the map. On the 6th floor, you reach the most crucial area of the entire volcano. If you travel to the door at the left side of the screen, you can receive the Ice Brand, which is a sword that also deals ice damage. Without this, I could not have completed this section of the game. Many standard enemies were difficult to kill because of their high physical resistance, and this turned the odds back in my favor. The next floor is also really interesting in its design. It's more like a spider web of ground separated by the lava, with doors on each end of the web. The bottom left door, for example, that is the door that's going to lead to the altar with the red crystal. The Crystal of Fire is doled out because of the Fiend of Fire's power sucking it dry. As it was with the Lich, a red orb begins talking to us, and we learn that her name is Marileth. In an explosion of red lightning, it transforms into Marileth, who clearly takes a lot of inspiration from mythological creatures or beings in Hinduism. Her bottom half is of a snake and has a humanoid upper body. Her skin is a bright red and has 6 arms with flowing golden hair. This was the most challenging fight I've had so far, and it really was not even close. Off the bat, my spellcasters were one-shot, and were continuously killed immediately whenever I used a Phoenix down to revive them. She's highly resistant to normal damage, which was a shame since my 2 physical damage dealers were all that were left. Luckily, I had that ice sword, since anyone with a brain can tell that this boss is weak to ice damage and blizzard spells. Even with it, it took me well into my 8th turn to defeat Marileth, who was relentless in her attacks. Even with the strongest armor I had at the time, the Warriors of Light were taking 150 to 200 damage per turn. While my white mage was alive, I was able to cast No Blaze and Silence, which was nowhere near as instrumental as I intended, though it was still helpful. You know, I thought she'd be using more fire spells against me, but she was a physical damage dealing monster. After the party defeats Marileth, the Crystal of Fire regains its shine, and we're free to leave the volcano. If we head back to the boat, we can sail further north to the next port, and then from there the party canoes downstream until they reach the Cavern of Ice. Walking into the dungeon, I was just immediately taken by surprise. Much like the vibrant reds of Mount Gold, the cavern is full of striking blues that are genuinely the most beautiful location I visited in the game. The sprite work for the ice shards is highly detailed, and I thoroughly enjoyed my experience in this cavern. Also of note for the first time in the wild is the music. Uematsu uses Matoya's cave theme, but the track fits much better here in my opinion. It makes the cave feel like it's been imbued with the magic, and we're here to uncover its secrets. What a legend. Thank you, Nobu Uematsu. In this area, you're going to fight a lot more spellcasters, like droves of Pisco demons and white dragons, or dark wizards, or maybe even a screen full of ghosts. A large majority of the early dungeon consists of simple traversal around the ice to move further down to the cavern. I will say that compared to other players' runs, this was the area where my leveling began to slow down, and I became slightly underleveled, which would cause major issues for my endgame experience. There were a lot of times where my party just didn't have the health to survive basic enemy attacks, which made a lot of mini-bosses exercises in thought and strategy, as opposed to spamming attacks like I had to up to this point. There was even a moment where a team of dark wizards entirely wiped my party by spamming lightning spells. This was the very first time I team wiped in the game so far. The first really interesting thing about the level comes when the Warriors of Light climb back up to the second floor of the cavern and find a room which contains a mysterious and shining blue pyramid, but approaching it as a trap. The snow around it isn't well packed, and stepping on it sends you tumbling down floors of the dungeon. After falling down to the depths, we are also introduced to a similar mechanic to the lava in Mount Gold. Sharp icicles that are covering the ground, and players take unavoidable damage walking through them. Ice armor can be found in a nearby chest, which is quite helpful if you chose to visit the ice cavern before attacking the volcano. Other chests reward the party with hefty amounts of gil. Making our way back to the icy pyramid, we interact with it for a mini boss battle with an evil eye, who goes down quickly if you barrage it with spells. After its defeat, the Warriors of Light obtain a piece of Levystone, an item crucial for the next major story development. Making the way out of the cavern and taking respite back at Crescent Lake, the party heads south to the Rukon Desert below them. It's a short walk and canoe crossing to reach the sandy plains. Once we step foot in the desert, we're treated to the first cutscene we've seen since the very beginning. The Levystone begins to raise a large figure out of the ground, revealing itself to be an airship of an ancient civilization that once claimed rulership over the skies with mechanical superiority. Access to the airship basically acts as our fast travel to any location and area in the game. You can use it infinitely to visit anywhere without being attacked by enemies, as long as you have a patch of uninterrupted ground to land on. I must also say that the track that plays during airship travel is especially whimsical and upbeat, fitting for how fun it is to be soaring through the skies. What a legend. Thank you, Nobu Uematsu. If we fly to the very tip of the northeastern corner of the map, the party reaches a town named Gaia. To outsiders, the town is known as the Eye of the Hawk, and an ancient city just to the south is called the Wing of the Hawk. The language of the people that live in the Wing of the Hawk is unknown to the common population, and as well to the party. Other dialogue tells us of a location to the west that will test our courage of anyone brave enough to enter, as well as information about the fairy that once lived in Gaia's lake until she just vanished one day. One woman also apparently saw a shining light fly off to the west. We also learn of an unknown scholar researching the Lufinian language, which we can only assume to be the dialect of the residents of that ancient city. One rash pirate outside of the church even claims to have caught the aforementioned fairy and sold her to a caravan. Also relating to the fairies, a special substance called oxy ale can be drawn out from the bottom of the lake by the fairy's magic. Aesthetically speaking, Gaia is naturally protected by mountains, and has been sheltered from all the destruction of the fiends have caused. The buildings are intact, the cobblestone path is well kept, and the people are all happy, despite the growing concern to retrieve their fairy. She can be purchased from the desert caravan a little later in the story for a hefty sum of 50,000 gil, so it's advised to never drop below that amount of money, although you could purchase her in whatever order you'd like. The weapon offered are the cat claws, which are a strong option for the black mage, who up till now had a laughably bad physical attack, and these raise the mage's physical ability considerably. Armlets and rings can also be purchased, but by this point there's a high likelihood that the majority of your party already has them equipped from exploring dungeons thoroughly. Onto the spells, what's interesting is that instead of all 4 level spell 7s being available for purchase, it is instead broken up into various amounts of level 7 and level 8 spells, with the remaining level 7 and 8 spells being sold in another town called Onrak. Present here are the 7th level white magic spells, Kuraja and Diaja, which are the ultimate forms of Cura, single target healing, and damage to undead to undead enemies. Sorry. For dark magic, you're offered Blizzaga and Break, where Break petrifies an enemy, and Blizzaga is the strongest ice spell. At the 8th level, white mages can learn Holy, Null All, and Dispel. Null All halves all magic damage for a single party member, and Dispel removes all of an enemy's elemental resistances, making them much more susceptible to magical damage. Holy is the ultimate weapon of white magic and the second strongest spell in the game. It deals heavy holy damage to every foe. Black mages at level 8 can learn Stop, Warp, and Kill. Stop paralyzes all the enemies with a high chance of success. Warp instantly kills all enemies by banishing them to another dimension, and Kill disposes of a single enemy with a high chance of success. With all that now out of the way, we have no further business in Gaia at the moment, so the Warriors of Light fly west, towards the upper central part of the world map, towards the Citadel of Trials, where they can further test their courage and bravery. After landing, the party makes their way into the Citadel. It is a somewhat dilapidated throne room with marble pillars smashed at their ends, but it's still gorgeous nevertheless. At the center of the room is a man who remarks that we come bearing the crown, and that our strength is clearly visible. We are allowed to attempt the trial, where one's inner courage will rise to the surface. After sitting on the throne, we are teleported to the trial, which is a series of teleporters that the Warrior of Light must navigate around, all the while dealing with zombie dragons and other undead fiends. At the end of the trial, we are rewarded with a rat's tail, which we present to Bahamut and the Cardia Islands. We fly over to those Cardia Islands to explore the non-hostile cave systems and talk to the peaceful dragons ruled by the King Bahamut. The party learns that there was an age where humans and dragons peacefully coexisted, back when that ancient civilization up north was prosperous and boasted technological marvels like massive mechanical castles and airships. From here, we meet with Bahamut, surrounded by a field of swords. We present the rat tail to him, who praises our bravery and rewards us with new titles befitting Warriors of Light. That's right, baby. It's time for a class upgrade. Warriors become knights, thieves transform into ninjas, monks evolve into masters, white mages into white wizards, and black mages into black wizards, respectively. You don't really get a stat upgrade, other than just to boost your health and resistance. After Cardia, it is time to finally rescue that stolen ferry. Heading even more west, we park the airship to a nearby desert and stumble upon the Desert Caravan, a traveling merchant who will sell us the ferry for 50,000 gil. After the transaction, we can return to Gaia. Once re-entering Gaia, the ferry breaks free from the party and flees to the spring. Following her, we find her safe and sound, albeit a little shaken up from being kidnapped earlier. She thanks us for freeing her though, and retrieves some oxy ale, which can be used to breathe underwater. With oxy ale, we have everything we need from Gaia and can start on our way to the next town, which will be Onrak, just letting you guys know. Onrak is on the complete other side of the map at the northwestern corner. Unlike Gaia, Onrak has much more damage from the fiends, most likely due to its close presence to the water fiend 200 years ago. It also has some inspiration from Greek and Roman architecture with their stone pillars. One important piece of information we receive here is knowledge about the sunken shrine. We are told that it contains great riches as well as the Rosetta Stone, a stone that can be used to translate ancient languages. Additionally, we learn of an ancient race of sky people who speak Lufenian, and the language can be translated by Un and Melmond if he has Rosetta Stone. The shining object falling from the sky can also be found at the nearby waterfall, which we'll go get later. For now, the Warriors of Light do some much needed shopping. The two remaining 7th level black magic spells are Saber and Blind. Saber increases the damage and accuracy of spells, and Blind inflicts darkness on an enemy. The white magic available is Null Death and Healaga. Null Death makes it incredibly difficult to be killed by instant death spells, and Healaga restores a lot of health to the party. With our Oxy Ale, the party is now ready to explore the shrunken shrine and combat the water fiend. Before we descend into the depths, a female figure appears out of nowhere to cry out for help. She tells us to restore the water crystalline shrine to its former glory, then vanishes into the ocean. To enter the shrine, we go to the dock and we take a submarine down to the 3rd level of the shrine. It's a heavily decayed structure, but still retains a lot of its beauty that it once had. The chests in the shrine are filled with heaps and piles of gil, which from here on out will be given to us in extreme excess. The enemies are naturally quite weak to lightning, which makes the Black Wizard quite strong here. Moving up to the front of the shrine, 2 paths are available. go up the stairs or descend down further. On my first playthrough, I went down first, but for the sake of simplicity in the video, we'll say that the Warriors of Light travel up the stairs first. If they go up to the large yet simple rooms, they'll ascend even further, eventually to the 5th floor of the shrine. Here, you'll find a series of rooms inhabited by mermaids who are crying out for someone to save the temple and to defeat the water fiend. In some adjacent rooms, you'll find 3 chests, one of which contains the next key item, the Rosetta Stone. Once it is obtained, we gradually work our way back down the stairs to the deepest depths of the ancient relic. There isn't much to say here, since there's no kind of gimmick or particularly hard enemies in the shrine. It's much more a visual spectacle of seeing the sunken nature of the shrine and seeing all the land forming around it underneath the water. And it kind of retains this and keeps this aesthetic until we reach the altar holding the water crystal. After the usual villain spiel, the blue orb that comes to us once again transforms now into the Fiend of Water. In this case, the infamous Kraken. Unlike classic sailor legend, however, this creature takes more inspiration from Lovecraftian horror than marine life. He's a large purple tentacled monster with a sick-as-hell cape. Naturally, he's weak to lightning damage, but unfortunately the Kraken also has a high resistance to magic. He boasts a variety of heavy-hitting physical attacks, however. His only spell is Ink, which inflicts the blind status element to the party, but I never actually got hit by it. Blind reduces the target's accuracy drastically, as well as bolstering the accuracy of the caster. Out of the 3 fiends the Warrior of Light have fought up to this point, the Kraken has been by far the easiest. You could just kind of rush him down and overwhelm it with physical attacks and magic, even though it's not that effective. There isn't much to say about this fiend, you know. The routine had become pretty standard by now, and not many surprises are thrown our way that we haven't already been prepared for. Once we defeat him, the crystal's light has been restored, and we can make our way outside of Onrak. After the defeat of the Kraken, the party wants to fly all the way back to Melmond, because now they possess the Rosetta Stone, which when given to Un, who stands out by the gravestone, can allow the heroes to learn the ancient language of the Sky People, Lufenia. With the translation complete, we can now understand the language of those who live in the Wing of the Hawk. Because of the densely packed forest south of Gaia, the airship isn't able to land anywhere close to Lufenia, so we trek through the land just like we used to in order to reach our destination. Lufenia is made of a yellowish stone that is reminiscent to me of a Mesopotamian city. Almost all of the dialogue here is important, so let's go through it. Lufenians are the descendants of those ancient sky people, and the airship we fly in was originally built by a Lufenian named Sid. The Lufenians hold a prophecy stating that 400 years after the fall of the civilization in the sky, the Warriors of Light will come forth and protect their people. The ancient flying castle remains in the air and now floating on a blue sea of stars beyond the sky. To record their history, the Lufenians passed down their memories through rituals, but the memories have begun to fade in the 400 years since the decline of the Sky People. The Sky People also created mechanical constructs designated to protect the flying castle and its inhabitants, and some of the machines may still be operational. To reach the floating castle, the Warriors of Light must make their way up the Mirage Tower, which is a gateway to the castle. The Lufenians began to theorize that another force was at play that was altogether in control of the 4 fiends. They theorized that the fiends weren't causing destruction of their own accord. To investigate this theory, the Lufenians designated 5 warriors to travel together, but it's been an incredibly long amount of time since they've heard anything from them. A rumor had begun to spread that the 5 warriors ended up being cursed by the fiends and were transformed into bats. We also learned that the Fiend of the Winds named Tiamat, and she's occupied residency of the Flying Fortress following the defeat of the Sky People. Apparently, they weren't able to collect their power due to Tiamat blocking the natural reserve of energy that the Wind Crystal has. And the last NPC in Lufenia gives us the Wind Chime, an item allowing the Warriors of Light to access the Mirage Tower. Far off in the corner of the area is a shop for the black and white magic, 1 spell each of the extremely powerful 8th tier of magic. The White Wizard can learn Full Life, restoring all the HP to a single party member, and then the Black Wizard can learn Flare, the strongest spell in the game, doing a massive amount of non-elemental magic damage. And before moving on, I'd briefly like to mention that to me, Lufenia was an incredible high point in the game. For a game from the late 80s, the world building that the Lufenians provide is astounding, and it really outshines any other NPC interaction or even talent or city I had in the game. The tale of an ancient race of people who claim domain over the sky only to be dragged back down to earth by the malicious actions of a creature corrupting nature itself is incredible. and for the time it was presented very well in an engaging way. I'm not much of a historian, but the dialogue made me feel like I was giving a chronological timeline of events, and anything that was missed in between, I was free to come to my own wild conclusions. I would hope that in the sequel, other towns are created in this manner, because I just enjoyed Lufinia so much with all the setup, the payoff, and the narrative weight it carries on in the future of the game. It was all just executed perfectly. Now, before the party tackles the Mirage Tower, they have one final key item to obtain, located in the Waterfall Cavern. The waterfall can be followed directly upstream of Onrek via canoe, and once passing through the waterfall, return to a pleasant sight color-wise. Pale blue floors and walls, with the pinkish pastel on the ground during battle. The waterfall is not complex at all, just turning a couple of corners and spacious paths. At the end of the waterfall is a door guarded by a fully filled screen of cockatrice and pyromist, which are stone-inflecting birds, and various mummies. They're very, very, very easily defeated, and with a mid-tier area effect magic like Fira or Thunders. The chest contained Gil, a ribbon, a wizard staff, and the Defender. All gear which is nice, but standard at this point in the game. Personally, I would advise on spending your Gil, which is now usually in the hundreds of thousands if you hadn't purchased every single smell, to buy the maximum carryable amount of high potions or heal potions, as well as ethers, and some antidotes and gold needles for good measure. They're extremely inexpensive in comparison to how much Gil you actually have, and is even more important for the upcoming sections at the endgame. The Warriors of Light are now ready to prepare to ascend the Mirage Tower. The first floor of the Mirage Tower is a wide looping circle with a large interior accessible through doors. Inside is a larger number of chests and a staircase leading up at the back of the room. My Egyptian Mesopotamian references in Lufinia is only proving to be even more valid here, as the ground is littered with stone slabs with hieroglyphic-like carvings and sand-bleached pillars. We encounter a lot of Guardians, which are machines originally made by the Sky People, which are now either working under Tiamat or just assigned to protect the tower. As opposed to the standard high fantasy setting we've become accustomed to, these constructs are much more sci-fi in nature, firing off laser beams to damage the party. Another common and annoying enemy were the Chimeras, which is a lion-goat-dragon amalgamation that did an annoying amount of fire damage with Blaze. Although I will admit, this is the start of me becoming extremely underleveled, as I began to favor story progression over grinding. I'm on a strict deadline after all, because I thought it'd be a fantastic idea to submit a work-in-progress retrospective of a game I wasn't even close to finishing, much less finish the script, recording, and editing. Despite the small challenge, we make it through, and it's an extremely simple tower, just following a small perimeter and then entering a room where the party has to fight a blue dragon. After the battle, the Warriors of Light can now use their warp cube on the warp pad to be transported to the Flying Fortress. It's time. The Flying Fortress. Once the party steps on the teleporter, we find ourselves high above the clouds in a cerulean blue fortress with multiple branching paths, all of which lead to chests, none of which have any items of note other than adamantite, which we can then send to the smith in Mount Durgard for him to forge a sword called Excalibur, which is the strongest night weapon. Around this area, the enemies begin to have a spike in strength, with Black Knights, Death Knights, and groups of air elementals being extremely powerful glass-skinned enemies, as well as hordes of semi-difficult foes to keep track of. At the northernmost tip of the first floor is another teleporter, and we take it to the second floor. Similar to Mount Gold, the rooms adopt a spiderweb or snowflake-like design, with branching paths in the cardinal and diagonal directions with inaccessible areas between each of them. Many of the rooms contain singular chests, sometimes with diamond gloves and shields, other times with black and white robes, which were a major defensive upgrade for my two wizards, as well as providing resistance to fire, ice, instant death, and irregularities against time. When used as items, the robes can cast Invisora or Blizzara. Much like the first floor, another teleporter could be found, this time at the southern tip of the floor. The fourth floor sprawls out much more and opens up, but most importantly has a large lens in the center of the floor. If the party are lucky enough to avoid a battle, you can interact with this observation deck, which looks over the entire world. From here, you see the locations of all the 4 crystals appear as a color trail and travel, converging until it reaches the central point. That location will decide it all. It converges at the Shrine of Chaos. The next floor is a long walkway leading to the altar that houses the dull green wind crystal. As we have done 3 times before this, we are approached by a green orb. It speaks of the Liches, Marinliths, and the Kraken's defeat, leading the Warriors of Light to this place at this very moment, which is to be their final and vital mistake. The green orb explodes in green lightning, and in its place now stands Tiamat, a dragon with many heads. Interestingly enough, when I did research for this video, I found that Tiamat is a primordial Mesopotamian goddess of the sea, once again reinforcing the ancient Egyptian Mesopotamian architecture of the fortress and the Mirage Tower. The fight against Tiamat was stupidly difficult at times. My plan was to go in, do some okayish damage with my knight, but mainly rely on the Black Wizard to obliterate it with Flare. Except every time I readied Flare as my action, the Wizard was knocked out during Tiamat's turn, making me burn through Phoenix Downs and exposing the rest of my party multiple times, as I kept on trying to get this strategy to work. She combines a crushing mix of spells and physical attacks. The spells including Thunderbolt, Poison Gas, Ice Storm, and Blaze. She is weak to stone and poison, however, meaning that if you use these status effects, she could be cheesed and killed instantly if the wizard gets lucky. Later on in the fight, my white wizard also died, leaving the job up to the knight and the master, who were luckily able to clutch out a win relatively quickly with physical damage. With the defeat of Tiamat, the wind crystal is restored to its beauty, and the Warriors of Light are in possession of all shards of the crystals, which means now that we can return to Crescent Lake like the 12 Sage said. Now, on our return to Crescent Lake, this is where we get the largest lore dump in the game, and it's not even close. We're given a vague background of what caused this great evil to plague the world in the first place. What follows is the paraphrased dialogue from the 12 Sages in no particular order. We learn that the Temple of the Fiends is located in the center of the 4 altars, which is the Chaos Shrine, and the time has come to destroy the root of this evil. With the 4 crystals once again shining, the time gate can be broken, and the true enemy is hidden 2,000 years in the past, when the world was suddenly thrown into disorder. Time is repeating, and to break it, the 4 chosen Warriors of Light must eliminate the enemy who plots 2,000 years in the past. Someone traveled 2,000 years in the past, and the 4 fiends were sent forward in time, the same fiends that threatened the world which we had to defeat. We're stuck in a time loop, as someone who traveled 2,000 years ago is the cause of the world's destruction. And after 2,000 years, he would once again travel back in time, and time will repeat itself. Alrighty, that's what the sages had to say. Pretty confusing stuff right now, I know. It'll get explained a little bit more thoroughly in a bit, I promise you guys. Just stick with it for now. And as I mentioned in the Flying Fortress, we can make a meaningful visit back to the dwarves in Mount Durgar. Although I barely touched upon it, we obtained a piece of adamantite in the Flying Fortress, and we can give that back to the blacksmith so we could forge the ultimate knight weapon, Excalibur. Once we have the legendary sword, the Warriors of Light prepare for the worst, and then they begin their trek back to where it all began. The return to Chaos Shrine. Once we're back in the Shrine of Chaos, we travel to the central room with the black crystal and the bats. As it turns out, the 5 bats that have been in the room were the same warriors who the Sky People sent out to investigate the true enemy 400 years ago. And because now we speak Lufenian, we can understand them, and also partly because of the light of the crystals. The bats tell us that as the chosen Warriors of Light, the light from our crystal fragments will open up the time portal to the beginning of the time loop. The other bats tell us that the power of the fiends absorbed from the crystals was all being siphoned into the past by the black crystal. And because of course that's how magic rocks work. You know, I just missed that part in school. The chosen heroes all stand before the black crystal, and they each shine the light from each of their respective crystal shards at it. The light causes, and I quote, the flow of time to surge and space begins to warp, and the chosen heroes take a step into the crystal. Where the black crystal once lay, now rests a rip in space and time, allowing us to travel across time as we please. We are transported 2,000 years into the past, as evidenced by the color and condition of the walls, the statues, and the stone pillars. From here, we exit the central shrine room and proceed to any of the 4 corners to descend further into the shrine. After some navigation and horrible ambushes by dark wizards and dark fighters, the Warriors of Light reach a room with a stone tablet. And from here, we begin to play the lute that Sarah from Cornelia Castle gave us. And the stone tablet transforms into a ladder. The party climbs down and follows long winding hallways in the basement until they reach the next set of stairs. In front of us, an oddly familiar brown ore blocks the step. I just wonder what this could be. So, the gimmick of this final dungeon is that in order to continue moving deeper down throughout the shrine, the heroes have to overcome a gauntlet that includes all of the 4 fiends, except that this time, their strength is amplified severely. And of course, the brown orb beings are fighting the Lich. Now, the Lich will only use 8th level black magic against our party, which means he's going to be using Flare, Stop, Warp, and Kill, as well as losing his weakness to fire and having his health being boosted. My strategy was to spam physical attacks with the Knight, preemptively use healing items with my Master, heal the party with the White Wizard, and then if our health is looking good, use Holy, and then burn through Flare with Black Wizard. But due to my poor leveling and grinding, my Black Wizard was often one-shotted, and my other party members took heavy damage. It was the first fight in the game where I truly had to rack my brain for the most strategic play if I wanted to survive till the next turn. After his defeat, we could progress further through the shrine until we have to again go down even more steps, this time blocked by Marilyn. This version of her is no longer weak to status ailments, is resistant to ice, and upgraded to the next tier of fire, blinding, and paralysis magic. I used the same strategy on the Lich as I used on Marilyn, except this time I ran out of flares and got down to my second last holy spell, which was enough to clutch out the kill. After these 2 fiend encounters, I'll have you all know that between fights and healing, my party ended up using 40 high potions and countless ethers. The damage I was taking was extreme, and the excessive item stockpiling is not seeming so excessive anymore. On the other hand, even while being amped up, the Kraken was still a joke of a boss. It was easy to kill because all it got was better stats and lost its lightning weakness. It was still using the same spells and attacks. It was easy to kill because I was just utilizing Flare and Holy. The only time it threw a wrench in my plans is that the Kraken learned Thundara, which did heavy damage to my Black Wizard. And lastly, we go for round 2 with good old Tiamat. She loses all of her weaknesses, but the only other change is that she gets an increase to health. She still uses the same spells of Scourge, Blizzara, Thundara, and Fira. And because of that, I was able to use the same strategy as I had been. But this time I ran out of both Flares and Holies, and I have to rely on Thundaga and Blizzaga near the end with everyone hanging on by a thread. Now, with the 4 fiends out of the way again, and with the only remaining task being to face the true enemy, now's the perfect time to explain what the hell is going on in this story. Let's start chronologically, starting from 2,000 years ago. A present-day knight with a lesser power, named Garland, traveled back in time to create a pact with the 4 fiends. In exchange for becoming the Demon King Chaos, Garland would catapult the fiends 2,000 years into the future, which is our present day, to destroy the world. This action created an unbreakable time loop. Around this time, the sages at Crescent Lake divined a prophecy stating that one day 4 warriors of light will free the world from the time loop and save the crystals from the fiends and Garland/Demon King Chaos. Now, 2,000 years in the past, Garland absorbs the power of the defeated fiends, the same power that was channeled into the Black Crystal, and uses it to become the Demon King Chaos. Back in the present day, the Warriors of Light use a teleporter and the Shrine of Chaos to travel back in time by 2,000 years to finally confront Chaos to end the time loop. I know some aspects don't make sense, or like how it even qualifies as a time loop, since mortal men can even survive 2,000 years, but I'm just working with the information we're given. You know, these 80s games kind of stretch believability in names of telling an awesome as hell story. And after that little story recap, we finally enter the room that Garland is hiding in, all of us existing 2,000 years in the past. Apparently, when we killed him for that first time in the beginning of the game, we truly did kill him, but the fiend saved him by sending his body through time by 2,000 years, thus averting his seemingly inevitable death. Once he arrived in the past, he sent the 4 fiends into the future to steal the crystal's energy and then sent it back to him. And one day, the 4 fiends will once again send Garland back in time with their accumulated power. Then in a flash of purple lightning, the Knight Garland transforms into the King of Demons, Chaos. He is a grotesquely angelic figure draped in golden wings and armor, but with monstrous horns and animal-like features, indicating a primal savagery and indiscriminate hate for life. Now, talk about the actual fight. I'm gonna be honest, it's hard as fuck, straight up. Like, I spent 4 hours fighting Chaos. I've made barely any progress because of how ridiculous his moves are and the damage could be. In the Pixel Remaster, he has a random chance to perform all of his abilities. The most common move is an extremely strong physical attack, which occurs 40% of the time. But the spells that he uses include Blizzara, Haste, Slowra, Viraga, Thundaga, Blair, Blaze, Tsunami, Cyclone, Kiraja, and Earthquake. Tsunami, Cyclone, and Earthquake are all essentially instant kills with how much freaking damage they do, as well as having the chance to heal himself to full health with Kiraja. It is absolutely unfair, and I wouldn't have it any other way. These classic 80s games always have high levels of jank, and we're already quite overdue for some good jank. But if the warriors overcome the darkness, the screen fades to white and transitions to a still shot of a forest surrounded by lakes and mountains, with text scrolling over the screen similar to the prologue. The time loop was severed at last. The endless struggle that raged over 2,000 years had ended, and peace prevailed once more. The light of the 4 crystals restored the forces of wind, water, earth, and fire. It was a mere trick of fate that had given rise to the chain of Garland's wrath. But magnified by the 4 forces meant to guide our world, that trick of fate also gave birth to the fiends. Monsters had run rampant as the world sank into darkness, but all that is now past. With the 4 forces flowing as they were meant, the warriors prepared to cross time and return to the world they knew, a world where Prince Sarah, Queen Jane, and even Garland himself awaited. When was this fateful day that sent time spiraling into a loop? No one can say. It seemed the cycle into which time had fallen would last forever. But the bravery of 4 young travelers changed that. They took the forces that filled the world with darkness and used them to bathe the world in light. None will ever recall the struggle the 4 endured, for the breaking of the chain means it never existed. But within the tales of fantasy that people tell, the memory of their deeds lives on. Tales of dwarves and elves, of dragons and shining civilizations that reached for the heavens even as they fell. And now their return is upon us. With the memory of their struggle buried deep in their hearts, they will quietly watch over our world. Remember always that the forces of the world must be used as they are intended, that the power of light must never be used for darkness, and that the true crystals reside in your heart. For you are the warrior who crossed time. You are the bringer of light. This was you who completed this journey. So, that was it. That was the high fantasy RPG which kickstarted a franchise which endured even the test of time. I really enjoyed the game, although there's some critical flaws with it, of course. While I enjoy the non-linear style of games, some direction toward your next objective would have been much more helpful. Like defeating Astos in Alfheim. I didn't even think to visit Mount Durgar, but the worst offender was directly after Durgar. When that canal opens up and we're given access to the entire map, there's absolutely no direction on where you should be sailing to next, and the vastness of the world made the thought of blindly drifting through it extremely daunting. Also, while I love the Dungeons & Dragons spell slot magic system, it was weighed down quite a lot by the limited nature of them. I'd be much more inclined to use and level up my Black Wizard if I didn't feel like every usage of my spells had to be important and crucial and timed. And this is why I prefer the mana or MP system for these kind of games. You don't have to predetermine the limit of how many spells you get to use. You can mix and match many different spells, or focus on a singular one as long as you have the required MP. It would really alleviate the stress of feeling like I wasted a spell slot. Further building on the combat, it became very grind heavy near the end of the game. It expects you to grind in each major dungeon for an absolutely absurd amount of time if you want to stand a chance against chaos. If any of your party members has less than 400 health, you're kinda screwed. Other than that, my only real criticism with the game is the extremely generic story for the majority of the narrative. I really only became invested when we arrived at Gaia and learned about the Lufenians and the Fortress in the Sky, which left maybe 15 hours of trudging through a bland story with poorly written characters with little to no narrative urgency. But that criticism isn't entirely fair, as the game was released in 1987, and the depths of the story at the time easily surpassed and outclassed all its competitors. But as a newcomer to the franchise who's not afraid to dismiss the nostalgia of others, my main judgment should be the one that holds the work to modern standards. After all, we live in modern times where all games coming out now meet those modern standards. But for a classic game that you can easily bang out in a weekend or two, it was a fun experience, and I would definitely recommend it. I couldn't be more excited to see how they handle the sequel.